Wrangel Island sits in the Arctic Ocean, north of Siberia and west of Alaska. It is separated from the mainland by wide stretches of sea ice that shift and crack with the seasons. The island's terrain is a mixture of low tundra plains along the coast and small ridges inland. There are no forests. Moss, grass, and small flowering plants appear briefly in summer, while driftwood arrives only sporadically along the shore. The surrounding waters freeze for much of the year. Winter brings prolonged darkness and extreme cold. Wind sweeps across the flat tundra without obstruction. In summer, daylight returns, and migratory birds fill the coastline for a short season. Polar bears traverse the shore and ice floes, as they have for centuries. In 1921, the island was uninhabited. No settlements offered protection, no ports provided shelter. Access depended entirely on sea conditions. Ships could only approach during narrow seasonal windows, and once the ice returned, any visitors were cut off. In September 1921, a small party landed on the northern shore. They brought rifles, provisions, and equipment for building shelter. They anticipated one winter of isolation. Only one would leave alive. The Wrangel Island expedition of 1921 was organized by Vilhjalmur Stefansson, a Canadian Arctic explorer. He believed that small colonies could exist in the far north and that establishing a presence on the island might strengthen territorial claims for Canada and Britain. Stefansson did not accompany the party. He remained on the mainland, providing planning, funding, and oversight. The group that sailed from Nome, Alaska, included 4 young men and 1 Inupiat woman. Alan Crawford, 20 years old, was the nominal leader. Lorne Knight, 28, had previous Arctic experience and familiarity with northern conditions. Fred Maurer, also 28, had traveled extensively in Arctic regions. Milton Gall, 19, had limited field experience. None had spent extended periods in the high Arctic alone. The 5th member, Ada Blackjack, was 23. A widow from Alaska, she had been educated in a missionary school and spoke English. Her young son suffered from tuberculosis, and she needed steady income. Ada was hired primarily as a seamstress and cook. She was not trained as a hunter, though she had experience with firearms from her community. Her role was intended to be supportive. She was not expected to manage hunting or survival tasks independently. The expedition carried rifles, ammunition, traps, and supplies intended to last 1 year. Lumber and canvas were brought for shelter construction. Stefansson assumed that relief ships would arrive the following summer, providing further provisions and support. The plan relied heavily on this assumption. On September 16, 1921, the party landed at Rogers Harbor. They unloaded equipment and began constructing a basic shelter from driftwood and the materials they had brought. Early hunting provided seals and occasional polar bears. The men recorded observations and mapped parts of the coastline. Ada organized food stores, prepared clothing, and assisted in shelter maintenance. At this point, the isolation was noticeable but manageable. The horizon remained empty of other ships. The group expected one winter of separation from the outside world. Beyond that expectation, no one anticipated the duration or difficulty that lay ahead. By late October 1921, the surrounding sea ice had solidified. Open water disappeared, and Wrangel Island became completely cut off from the outside world. Winter darkness extended across the tundra. Temperatures dropped sharply, and wind swept unimpeded over the flat plains and low ridges. Travel beyond the camp became difficult and unpredictable. The expedition had planned for 1 winter of isolation. Hunting continued, with seals taken at breathing holes and occasional polar bears approached cautiously. Rations were carefully managed, and the men took turns patrolling for game and maintaining the shelter. Early success in securing food and warmth reinforced their expectation of survival through the season. When summer arrived in 1922, the promised relief ship did not appear. Ice conditions had prevented its passage. Weeks stretched into months, and the horizon remained empty. Provisions intended as reserve began to feel limited. Confidence in regular supply weakened. Small errors in rationing, miscalculations in hunting, and the unpredictable nature of the Arctic made daily life more fragile. By late 1922, the situation changed irreversibly. Lorne Knight began to exhibit signs of illness consistent with scurvy, likely caused by prolonged deficiency of fresh meat and vitamins. Hunting became harder for him, and his mobility declined. The remaining men discussed the options and eventually decided that some would attempt to reach Siberia across the ice in January 1923. Alan Crawford, Fred Maurer, and Milton Gow left the island, taking sleds and provisions. They were never seen again. Their departure marked the point at which the remaining members, Ada Blackjack and Lorne Knight, faced true, unavoidable isolation. The island, the wind, and the ice now defined the limits of survival. Chapter 4, Daily Life on Wrangel Island. Target word count, 900. After Crawford, Maurer, and Gow departed in January 1923, only Ada Blackjack and Lorne Knight remained at the Rogers Harbor camp. Knight's condition worsened steadily. He suffered from scurvy, which left him weak, swollen, and increasingly immobile. Hunting, which had previously been shared among the men, fell almost entirely to Ada. Though she had limited experience, she learned to use the rifles effectively and relied on traps to supplement food supplies. Her daily routine became structured and meticulous. Mornings began with checking on Knight and preparing what food could be spared. She inspected traps and scouted the shoreline for seals or other wildlife. She collected driftwood and animal fat for fuel, repaired clothing from hides, and mended the camp's canvas and wooden shelter. Every action was necessary and calculated. Mistakes carried immediate consequences. The Arctic landscape dictated the rhythm of life. Storms appeared quickly, reducing visibility and making travel dangerous. Temperatures often fell below freezing, even in early spring. Snow accumulated against the shelter walls, requiring constant maintenance. The tide and shifting ice added uncertainty, as even nearby areas could become impassable in hours. During the months of her care for Knight, Ada maintained a diary. Her entries were factual: the weather, the results of hunting trips, the state of the shelter, and Knight's condition. They did not elaborate on fear or emotion. This brevity reflected both the need for mental focus and the limited time available for reflection. She recorded the essentials needed to survive day to day. In June 1923, Knight died. Ada moved his body outside the main shelter and placed it under cover to protect it from scavenging animals. From that moment, she faced total isolation. The routine became even more crucial. She rotated between short hunting trips, maintaining the shelter, drying and storing meat, and preserving ammunition. Eggs and birds were collected when available. Occasionally, she successfully hunted a polar bear, securing meat and fat sufficient to last weeks. Summer brought extended daylight, which made travel and hunting slightly easier. She adapted her movements to the changing season, taking advantage of thawed patches along the shoreline and tundra. However, the environment remained unforgiving. Ice could shift unpredictably, and bears still roamed the island. As autumn approached again in 1923, Ada prepared for another winter. She reinforced the shelter with driftwood and sewn hides, arranged supplies carefully, and preserved remaining ammunition. Success depended on routine, observation, and consistency. She could not rely on chance. Every day's work contributed directly to survival. Though entirely alone, Ada maintained the discipline necessary to live. Hunting, maintaining shelter, and rationing food were not extraordinary feats. They were methodical, repeated actions. The Arctic demanded attention, and in this landscape, survival was measured in the ability to follow routine despite uncertainty, fatigue, and the absence of human contact. By late summer, after nearly 2 full years on Wrangel Island, Ada had survived through repeated winters, a harsh climate, the death of companions, and the loss of all immediate support. She remained attentive, practical, and consistent, living according to necessity rather than expectation. Her endurance was quiet and measured, a testament to methodical survival. Autumn returned in 1923 with shorter days, colder winds, and drifting snow across the tundra. Ada faced the long second winter alone. The departure of Crawford, Maurer, and Gow, followed by the death of Lorne Knight, left her entirely responsible for survival. There was no one to share tasks, no voice to break the silence. Hunting remained the central concern. Polar bears continued to roam the coast, presenting both risk and opportunity. Ada learned to judge wind, terrain, and animal behavior. She shot selectively, conserving ammunition and ensuring each kill provided the maximum possible sustenance. Eggs, bird nests, and the occasional seal supplemented her diet. Fuel for warmth came from driftwood and rendered animal fat. Each day required deliberate attention to shelter, clothing, and provisions. Psychologically, the isolation pressed steadily. Days blurred, and the horizon offered no sign of relief. Her diary, concise and factual, noted weather, hunting results, and maintenance tasks. The writing itself became a means of structuring time. Without companionship, every activity was essential and every error consequential. By the end of the season, Ada had survived nearly 2 years of continuous isolation, enduring hunger, extreme cold, and relentless Arctic conditions. She had adapted to the island, not by mastery over it, but by careful observation, disciplined routine, and incremental learning. Though the losses were profound, survival depended entirely on practical action. Each day completed was a measure of endurance in a landscape indifferent to human presence. In August 1923, after navigating heavy Arctic ice, the schooner Donaldson reached Wrangel Island. The vessel had been dispatched as a relief mission once earlier resupply efforts had failed. Ice conditions delayed its progress, and the crew had navigated cautiously to avoid becoming trapped. As the ship approached Rogers Harbor, the crew observed movement near the shore. Ada Blackjack, dressed in clothing she had sewn and maintained herself, was alive. She remained the only survivor of the 1921 expedition. The relief party came ashore, confirming the deaths of Lorne Knight and the 3 men who had attempted the crossing to Siberia. Knight's body remained where Ada had placed it after his passing. The 3 men were never found. Later evidence suggests they perished on the ice or along the Siberian coast. Ada's physical condition reflected extended hardship but not collapse. She had maintained adequate nutrition and shelter, preserved ammunition, and organized supplies to support survival for nearly 2 years. There was no ceremony on the island. Records and diaries were collected. Essential items were packed. Ada boarded the Donaldson and departed, leaving Wrangel Island silent once more. After returning to Alaska, Ada Blackjack resumed life in Nome. News of the expedition spread slowly, with initial reports often misunderstanding her role. Over time, recovered diaries and accounts clarified the sequence of events. The 3 men who attempted the journey to Siberia were never found. Lorne Knight's diary documented his final months, while Ada's own entries confirmed her careful, methodical survival. The expedition did not achieve its original purpose. Wrangel Island remained uninhabited and later came under Soviet control. Ada lived quietly, avoiding public dramatization of her experience. Her survival stands as a measured record of endurance in isolation, a testament to discipline, observation, and resilience in the harshest of environments. The island returned to its silence, indifferent and enduring.